particular screen that you have here today. So a little bit about what Orbrix and Training Excellence does is, if you look at the 8 academies that we run from, we've got our CBRN Academy that I told you is our core focus area. Then we've got Radiation Protection Officer Training, which is another core focus area training that we're doing. And those trainings are happening almost every week. And we were one of the first training providers here in the Middle East to start some of the training online right in March already. So we're glad to say that people that needed that certification, especially for their licensing, especially for their CME points, did not have to wait until people could go back to the office. And I'm very proud of the team, Ermal and the team, to be able to make sure that that was possible. And then, of course, part of today's session is what we're running in terms of our Business and Leadership Academy, where we are starting to run a lot of virtual training sessions. And it's not just online, where you can go online, but you can virtually listen to a facilitator, question and answer them, do practical activities in class where we have breakaway rooms specifically for that. And, of course, then come back to the session and consult. So we're trying to create this environment, which is very much like the physical environment, without losing essence of why you are here today. And of course, in terms of that, is to ensure that we do engagement, organizational health, and personal driving dynamics in every team. So we're not just training for the sake of training. It's about actually identifying where the need is and then fulfilling that actual need so that you can have a return on your investment of what you are investing in your development as well. So as I've mentioned, we went virtually live, and it's more importantly about being able to assist those heroes that are out there who are doing what people do best. So we looked at virtual workshops, which you are part of now, the virtual panel discussions, which we've completed one roll of panel discussions in last month, but we're starting our summits, which are now going to be specific on certain topics. And our first summit runs on the 18th of June. Please do join us. It is regarding the chemical, biological, nuclear, and radiation sector, where we look at the lessons that are learned during COVID in terms of what do we do next in terms of crisis management and disaster management. So please feel free to join us on the 18th of June. Watch out for those adverts that will be popping up on your screen shortly. As far as the housekeeping, before I hand over to Ashraf, please make sure that if you are unmuted, that your phones are silent, that there isn't any background sound coming from your side. We welcome interaction, and I know Ashraf is the type of person who doesn't just want to talk, he wants to hear your views and get your points across. So please, if you have any questions and he's busy with a slide, park it onto your chat. We will take the questions, and the moment he's completed with a particular point, we will then take some questions from there as well. Most importantly, please be interactive and participate. We'd now like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Ashraf Garda, and some of you can see him on the screen already. And as far as a little bit about Ashraf, Ashraf and I met, I think about 3 years ago at a conference. And I must tell you, with my luck, one of my panel speakers actually, unfortunately, something urgent happened and they couldn't make it. And somebody told me, Ashraf Garda is here. And I said, hey, hang on, I need to go and speak to him. And I went to him, and at a whim of a notice, just within seconds, I went to him and I said, Ashraf, can you please fill in for our panel speaker? And immediately, without hesitation, he actually said, Hawa, no issues, I'll go. And since then, the two of us have built a kind of a collaboration at various conferences, various events, and we've been a kind of a go-to person for each other in terms of what it is we need in that industry. So today, in running this particular topic, there was no better person for me to say that, Ashraf, are you able to do this? So Champion South Africa, he's the chief driver of Champion South Africa. He's the host of the Ashraf Garda Show podcast, YouTube, and the Champion South African podcast. He's a talk show host. He used to be the talk show host on SAFM Radio, national broadcaster in South Africa, a host of Special Assignment, which is, those of you who watch it, it was a very interesting program, which was an investigative journalism TV show as well in South Africa. He used to be a sports presenter on 5FM. And he's currently as well a professional speaker, an MC, a conference moderator, and also he does media training. And this is one of the topics that he's going to be doing here with us today. So without further ado, Ashraf, I'm going to hand over the process to you. Thank you very much once again for joining us. It's all yours.
Thank you for that, Hawa, and the warm greetings. And in South Africa, forget other languages. If we just say sharp, sharp, you'd know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so great to have you, all of you, join us. I understand that Hawa was very clear to say we don't need maximum numbers, we need to cap it, but we sort of gone slightly above the maximum, which does suggest that there's a demand. Now, just today, ironically, I posted something on my various social media platforms, which is, we should all try and learn one small skill a day, one small skill, whatever it is, right? Even like maybe how to switch on your computer. And if we do that, we'll be learning 365 small skills every single year. And then endeavor to try and learn one big skill at least once a month, so that at the end of a year, we'd have 12 new skills we would have learned. So I think with that in mind, all of us are learning around how to present online. It's foreign territory for many of us, but also as I talk to you now, I think some of you have faced the media, but many of you have not. And even if you have faced the media, there are always certain skills and techniques to learn. So keep that mind open, learning a new skill, small skills and big skills every day, every month, because when you do that, and I'm going to quote from something that means a lot to me, and I've said this before, this phrase, champion people build champion nations, which is the mantra of the Champion South Africa movement that I head up. And if you internalize what that means to you and the country that you reside in right now, that your country needs you to punch above your weight to become the champion at what you do for your country to win. You win, your country wins. Okay, so with that in mind, it's important to learn new skills. Now, I did say today's topic, 30 things and more you need to know before you face the media. We've got an hour, or maybe just less. So let's see how far we go with this thing. And I think I will say this up front, okay? If you've never faced the media before, you're not going to end up today saying, well, I'm now a media practitioner, I know exactly what I need to do. It's very much like learning how to drive a car, or perhaps going to gym for the first time. When you learn to drive a car on day one, we all have been through this. There are trepidations, whether you're going on a manual car or an automatic car, just the notion of touching an accelerator or a brake or a steering is alien to all of us. And then when we repeat it often, again and again and again, what happens? We all become better at it. So I think with that in mind, this is the same principle applying to facing the media. I think too many people, and some people are politicians, leaders of countries, others are leaders of businesses, others are leaders of NGOs, some people are self-employed or professional people in their own right. For too many of us, we are prepared to invest in everything else, like invest in your degree, invest in your career, invest in other things, without realizing that there's a chance that you may one day have to face the media. And that's the one we leave to chance. So the day that you face the media for the first time, whether it's a friendly facing of the media or an unfriendly facing of the media, that's the day you're going to learn everything in one shot. Now, that's like learning how to do a session like this, or a Zoom session or something else online for the very first time. There's a whole lot of people that need to assist you. So why would you leave facing the media to chance? Something for you to consider. So with that in mind, I want you to think about this and maybe just nod to yourself, or maybe even a quick vote. I mean, you can just vote on this right away, okay? However many people watching me right now, how many of you have faced the media? And I'm talking specifically electronic radio and television. How many of you have been interviewed? I'm not talking presenters now. How many of you have been interviewed in the media space? So perhaps I would love it if you do this right away. Just yes or no if you haven't, okay? Just so that myself and Hawa will get a sense of how many of you, okay? Now, as you're doing that, this is my theory. It's not scientific. It's relatively thumbs up, but I don't think I'm wrong of this one here. I'm suggesting, let's say if we are 50 people following this presentation today, I'm going to suggest that probably 30 of you would have faced the media, mainstream media in some form on radio or television, right? Now, here's the next question. So the 25 odd have not faced the media. They don't know if they're ever likely to, but you need to prepare for it. Here's the second point. and this is the part I'm particularly interested in. I'm suggesting of the 25 or 30 of you that have faced the media, probably not more than 10% of you face the media more than once, probably like 3 times, 5 times, 10 times. So I'm suggesting, therefore, if we 50 people, not more than 10 of us in total, right, which is maybe pretty high, will or are regular media commentators. Okay, and that's the part I'm particularly interested in. So 80% of you face the media once, twice, end of story, goodbye. 10, 20% of you become regular commentators. Now, I'm interested in that person, and the basis of us talking today is about that, because there are 2 times offhand you face the media. You either face the media because you're in trouble, you or your organization are in trouble and you need to face up to the facts about what you or your organization did, for example. And that's what most people think, that facing the media means, oh my goodness, it's hostile, I'm in trouble. Maybe if you're Donald Trump, yeah. But the reality is, if you follow the history of people facing the media, the vast majority of all of us face the media in actually very friendly circumstances, where you are representing your organization for something your organization has achieved, where you are representing your organization for something that you want to achieve, something new that you're launching, where you've done something spectacular, somebody, you want to acknowledge somebody else, you want to portray an opinion on behalf of your organization and reflect that opinion, and so on and so on. Now, therefore, I'm saying to you, in the vast majority of cases, people face the media in friendly surroundings, not in hostile surroundings. Yet the slant is that we probably face it more often in hostile surroundings. Now, if we have time, we'll talk about both. I'm particularly interested if we're saying only 20% of you will become regular commentators, being interviewed regularly in the media space, then what about the balance? My interest in presenting to you today is about just that. How do I get you to be so connected, to embrace the media, to understand how you can leverage the media to build the brand of your own self and to build the brand of the company or the organization you represent? Now, why is that important? It's important because the media is an incredibly influential space. You have an opinion, and I'll just maybe use this one example. For South Africans, you'll understand it, but in South Africa, there's a professor who's now the Vice Chancellor at the University of Witwatersrand, Professor Adam Habib. Now, when he was shortlisted for the position of Vice Chancellor, there were 3 candidates, and I remember very clearly the university saying that all 3 candidates were outstanding, but ultimately they went with Adam Habib, assuming everything else was equal about all 3, because Adam had displayed an ability to handle media issues, himself being a social scientist or a political scientist, and therefore not just had a media profile, but was a regular commentator on social political issues, meaning that the university, one of the leading universities in South Africa, were very comfortable that a person like this could best front them up when needed to. So that is why I want to focus on that part. The media is incredibly influential. You have a voice, you have an opinion, you have an ideal, you have a purpose, you want others to buy into your purpose. So how do you go about doing that? Can you imagine talking to yourself? You can't do that if you talk to yourself. You have to talk to other people. So for that to happen, there's a limit to how many friends you can WhatsApp. The reality is you need to be able to get onto mainstream or mass media to pass on a message. And to do that, you need to become an effective communicator. So my thoughts, therefore, are just that, based on how do you become the 80%? How do you turn the 80% into the 10 or 20% that are regular media commentators? Because when you do that, you will find your personal brand grows, your organization brand grows, your messaging grows, people buy into your messaging, you become an on-demand person, you become an authority in your space. You become a luminary in your space. So when people think about entrepreneurs in the airplane industry, we say Richard Branson. Why? Some of us have never met Richard Branson. We only know about Richard Branson because of his exposure in the media. So as you can see, often when I talk about media, I talk about media and branding, because I think it's particularly important that you do just that, right? Have I noticed as I talk, it talks about slow network. Are you, just tell me if you can hear me still well and you can watch me clearly?
Yes, going good. No problem on our side, Ashraf.
Okay, fine. I just see there's something saying whatever, so I will ignore that, right? Okay, so that's the first thing you need to know. How do you get into the 10 or 20%? The second one I mentioned about being nervous about driving a car. So you need to repeat this. If you don't know, please do not wait to drive a car for the first time in your life when you need to drive to a hospital. That's ridiculous. Learn to drive a car so you know how you can do so, right? And that means going to a media training school. And that's something that I have done very, very often, right? So I'm going to break it down into 3 parts. What happens before you go on air? What happens when you're on the air, and what happens post? And let's see if we've got time to talk through all those things, okay? So before you go on air, if you've been asked by someone, an organization or media platform, that they would like to interview you, the first thing you need to be asking is like, who is going to do the interview? The second thing is, what is the channel? The third one is, how long will the interview go on for? The fourth one would be, am I going to be the only person being interviewed? And the fifth one is, would there be a call in as well? Now, why am I asking all those questions? It's incredible in my experience as a talk show host, how often people don't know the answers to that. The first one, what's the channel? I take it that whoever set it up, you would have known that. Number 2, you need to know the presenter. You can't go on a blind date. You need to know the presenter style. Some people are very funny, some people are quirky, some people are authoritative, some people come across very demanding. You need to know the style of the presenter before you go on air. So whether it's radio or television, make the point of listening or watching how that person engages when they've done previous interviews. And in today's world, goodness, everything is available. So do just that, right? The time is important. If you're going to talk for 15, if they tell you 15 minutes, accept the fact that you probably don't have more than 5 or 6 points to make. If the interview is going to be for an hour, accept the fact you've probably got 20 points to make in the 1 hour. So you cannot prepare for an hour when the interview is only going to be 5 minutes, because your mindset is very different in terms of how you prepare for a 5-minute interview versus how you prepare for a 1 hour interview. The other point, whether you're going to be alone, is very important. I'm amazed how many people don't ask that. If you're part of a, let's just say, for example, you're talking, it's very topical, you're talking COVID-19, and let's say you're a scientist, and if you're being asked to be interviewed for 5 or 10 minutes alone, then it's your view and the presenter. If there's 2 people or 3 people, it means debate. It must tell you that immediately, which means if it's a debate, you have the right to know who else is going to be on that debate, whether these are people you agree with or whether their views are people you do not agree with. For example, if you're from the World Health Organization and Donald Trump is on that same interview, you better well know that. Okay, so know who the other 2 people are. You have that right to know that. Also, if you're on for 10 minutes and there's 2 people, or even just 2 of you, then you know your time is going to be diluted. So you're going to be cut down to 5 minutes each maximum, approximately. So that's very, very important as part of your training. Is there going to be a call-in? Why you need to know that? Because you need to be geared for that. If call-in, how are you going to handle calls? If there's no call-in, then you know it's not important. But you need to therefore be prepared for that if there is, in fact, going to be a call-in or not. Okay, in today's times, of course, people, presenters do pick up comments via social media, in particular Twitter, which is very news driven, but that's fine. That's not the same as a live call-in. But I would suggest today accept the element of a listener or an audience participant in some form, whether it's a call-in, whether it's via social media, or a short messaging service, it's bound to happen. So be prepared for that question that's going to come from left field. Okay. Now, here's the other part that is important. In the combination between yourself and the presenter, who's the most important person of the two? And you may want to do a quick answer via a poll and tell me, is it the presenter or is it you as the guest? Who's the most important person when that interview is happening? You tell me which one it is. I'd love to see the results just now via this poll. But here's my answer, and it's a trick question, I suppose. Between the presenter and the guest, the most important person of the two is in fact none of the above. It's the audience. That missing person who doesn't call in, who's silent, who you cannot even see, is the reason why you're being interviewed in the first place. Why is that important for you to know? Is that your answers are not geared to please the presenter. Your answers must be geared to drive, not even to please the audience, but to drive home a message to that audience. Listener, viewer, radio, TV, doesn't matter, okay? Everything you do on air must be driven to that third person, because that will change your mindset, right? And everything in terms of your preparation must be geared to just that. Now, the next thing, before I pause for a second, all interviews can be divided into, you can subdivide very quickly when you're doing an interview. They're either an entertainment form of interview, they're either a biography, which is a profile about yourself, they're either a pinning down or an authoritative interview. They could, all interviews should be one of those three, okay? So biography, authoritative, and did I say information-based as well? Yeah, information-based as well. But all of those must be entertaining, because the nature of radio and television, if you're doing an authoritative interview and it's not entertaining, there's a switch off. If you are a guest in a profile interview about your life and you sound terribly boring and you sound terribly unenthusiastic and you just wish you were somewhere else, well, why would you expect the viewer then to be committed to you when you are committed to not even being on that show, right? If you are also providing an authoritative interview, once again, say on COVID-19, it's a very serious topic, but it still has to entertain an audience. Otherwise, they will listen and watch that very serious topic on another channel, okay? If the interview is also emotional, it could also be, about a tragedy in a country or a family. Even that, ultimately, people can choose which channel they watch. And the way you present your case is what makes them watch you and makes compelling viewing or compelling listening. Now, I'm going to pause. I'm saying to you, all those things must form part of your preparation before you go on air. And here's the last part around that part. You need to have a very clear plan. Often we say the person in the media has an agenda. Well, true, not true, I don't know. But what stops you from having an agenda? So when you're being asked to be interviewed, have you ever asked yourself why you're saying yes? And if you haven't, best you do just that. Why am I saying yes to this interview? What's my reason for saying yes, that I wish to be interviewed? And the answer you give has to flow through the answer you're going to give when you finally go on air. So there's a lot of homework you need to be doing, understanding the audience, that you're directing it to your audience, understanding who the presenter is, the station, the format. If you are on a music station and if you are on a news station, the way you project yourself is going to be different. You're true to your cause, but you must understand, if you are speaking to 20 people who are teenagers listening to music, and you're speaking to an audience of 40 plus, do not tell me that I'm going to just be myself because I want to speak the way I want. If you speak to a 20-year-old below and you don't use the word I'm woke, you've lost that audience. You need to know that. If you speak to a 40 and 50-year-old and you say, well, I'm very woke and I hope you woke, believe me, you've lost the audience. So know your audience at all times. And that has to happen before you actually go on air, right? Now, however, I'm going to pause for a moment because if there's any questions, then just on that, only on the preparation part, any questions, any comments that I can answer on that part only before we get to the actual interview side.
Sure. Yes, Ashraf, we have we have a few comments, but I'll just raise the questions. Naz is actually asking, how do you keep your audience engaged? And then there's a few comments after that, but if you can maybe address that question first. Ladies and gents, if you have any questions, I see Mr. Ziffer's hand is up and he would like to ask a question. Please, you're more than welcome to put your camera on as well. So let's first address Nazira Turki's question is, how do you keep your audience engaged, Ashraf?
Okay, so I think you do it on two bases. First of all, understand your audience. I'm repeating it, and I think you need to know that, right? So Nazira, whoever you're speaking to, accept the fact that if you're speaking to an audience from around the world, like we are doing now, and I'm talking now, that it's not a South African audience. It's a South African, UAE, Pakistan, London, Ghana, as I've heard. So different people. So understand that they need to buy into your message, number one. Number two, you do that by understanding that you better sound interesting. You see, I'm not even discussing the content now, but you better sound interesting. You must, this is an important point. We use the phrase a seat at the table. When you're being interviewed on radio and television, you in fact have a seat at the front table. It is a massive privilege. And I've said so before, I don't think more than half of you have been interviewed on radio and TV. I don't think more than 10% or 20% maximum get invited regularly. So that group, you are in a privileged position. The mindset is like, how do I use that privileged position, right? Prepare accordingly. Make sure that your topic that you're going to be talking about, and we'll talk about that just now, is so interesting, so compelling as a guest that the people who are watching you cannot help but stay tuned. There are people watching me talking to you right now, and they probably have other things to do in this very busy world. I'm going to give them a reason to say, but do you know what you may be missing? The type of tools that you need to be learning if you're going to switch off. In the same way, Naz, in your space, which is in personal finance, I would think that give them a reason, because you're the authority, give them a reason for them not to switch off, which means tease them along as you talk of what's going to come up next, okay? The other part, and this is, I'm going to jump into this because it's important. Most people, for some reason, tend to think of being interviewed as terribly daunting, and you may be right, but I think it's because the mindset is wrong. So for me, an interview is not a serious question and a serious answer. I understand there are differences. People who are doing authoritative pinning down interviews, mainly parliamentarians, maybe people who are involved in organizations who've done something seriously wrong, that can be slightly different. It may not apply to all of you today. We'll have a chance to talk about it. But for the majority, people think it is a problem. So they are too formal. They'll only answer questions that people ask, the presenter asks them. They're too stiff. They feel they need to sit like that, and sort of as if they are in a university lecture room. In my experience, I often get asked by people, and sometimes I promise you this, I get asked by people a minute before they go on the air. Have you ever been on air before? What's your advice? Like with 1 minute. So if I've got 1 minute to give people advice to be interviewed on radio or television for the very first time, this is the only advice I give them. One, understand the privilege of your position. The second one, understand the fact that you know everything, your presenter knows nothing. That's why the dumb presenter is asking you questions, and you can answer the way you want because you know it all, right? I don't really mean dumb, but you get what I'm saying. And the third one, and this is important, the best interviewee is an interviewee who can replicate a coffee table chat. Why do people have so many coffee table meetings? Because it has an ambiance that is far better than a formal university or boardroom lecture room. It's too formal. So you have a coffee chat, and this is what you need to be doing. When you watch when you watch two people having coffee, but they're having a meeting, what do you see? You see two people engaging in a chat. They are so engrossed in that conversation. So it's like you and your friend, as your friend asks you a question, your friend doesn't know the answer. You are so engrossed and you're so clued up with the answer that you're only too willing to share that answer, to the point that you can't stop talking, both of you. And when the waiter comes to deliver your coffee, that coffee is an interlude that you don't really want. It interjects your conversation and you hope that the waiter doesn't come. And when that happens, there are people in 10 other tables seated around you. You know what happens? Nobody, you don't even know those people around you, because you and your friend are so engaged in that conversation. Now, here's the quick image I want to leave with you. Whenever you do interviews, think of yourself having that coffee with your friend. Your friend is asking you questions. You are answering those questions in a coffee shop. You're not interested in the people around you. You don't even want the waiter to interrupt you, because the news you have to share with your friend is so important that you want to tell that friend as much as you can. I'm going to stop there, because that's the image you need to take and replicate. And if you do that regularly, Nez, you specifically, you will be interviewed regularly on media.
Absolutely.
And your brand will grow and it'll be good for your business.
Good, great. Thanks, Ashraf. I see Neville has agreed he likes the coffee chat. He also mentions that he suggests that was given that the suggestion he was given that he stuck by is really knowing why. Why are you being interviewed? I see Brother Zafar and Yusuf Sayed has a question. Would you like to raise it now, Yusuf?
Yeah, Ashraf, I think you've answered it on the coffee chat. So my question was, how do you get to know the viewership or audience in advance? Do you ask the radio station or the TV station? I'm sure the guys also get the demographics up front to know the viewership, age, gender, etc. So how do you get to know who your audience is in preparation for the event itself?
Okay, so I think two things. If you represent an organization, there's a very good chance the communications team in your organization would have set up the interview. Okay, then they would and they should provide you all that information. And if they don't, for goodness sake, go and ask them. Tell them I cannot go on this blind date. Quote me, like I can't do it. I need to know who I'm dealing with. So that's assuming you don't know the station either. So for example, I don't live in the UAE. Assuming I came to Dubai one of these days, and Hawa, who's based between South Africa and Dubai, says, Ashraf, a so-and-so channel wants to interview you. It would be ridiculous if I just went and talked. I would have asked her all these questions. Give me the demographic. Give me the type of people who not just watch or listen. What are they normally interested in? What type of issues? Then I would ask, who's the presenter? And I want examples of the presenter. I want to watch what the presenter does. I want to know the style of how they operate, because we all don't do it very, very differently, right? At a lesser level, assuming you are in your own organization, so you're not going to get a communications head, you are the communications head yourself, well, then simply do the work. And let me give you a classic example that happened yesterday. I'm presenting to you people today, okay? I asked Hawa one question amongst the many. I said, Hawa, give me an idea of the people who have signed up, because I need to know who they are. Even if I don't know all the names, I need to know the countries. I need to know more or less what they do, so I know who I'm talking about. I've noticed I don't think there's a single teenager tuned in, so I know I don't have to speak to them. You get my point? I can speak to you guys as parents, perhaps. It's as simple. You need to do the research. The responsibility is on you if you want to deliver to that audience. The responsibility is on you if you want to deliver a message that will be compelling on behalf of the organization you represent. And if you do that well, you'll be interviewed far more, again and again. Repeat interviews, like repeat business, is what you're after.
And before we take Brother Zafar's question, just to add to that, I mean, this is why you use systems that will be able to gather that information from you, for you. So when people register, they need to fill out questions. What do you hope to achieve out of this? What industry are you in? What exactly? And especially on these live chats, which are webinars. So Ashraf, spot on. Brother Zafar, you have a question? And then we can move on with Ashraf's talk after this question, and then take questions later.
I don't know. I don't see myself on the screen. Am I still there?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can see you very clearly.
Okay. Great. First of all, I just want to congratulate Ashraf for brilliant, deliberation on this very complicated challenge of attending or appearing in a talk show or, my own experience. I have been on both roles. I've been interviewed and I have interviewed also at times in the past. My own perspective, just adding to what you said was, if I look at who among the stakeholders of that program, obviously the audience is the biggest stakeholder because you have to make sure that you're meeting the stakeholders' expectations to be successful. But simultaneously, I think there is another stakeholder that I don't want to ignore, and that is the TV channel or radio channel owner, because they're doing it as their business and they want more and more viewership. And you, as a participant in the interview, will be really very, very appealing to them if you could bring in the discussion things that appeal to the people and to the audience. So you want more audience. So one interview is good. You want more audience requesting, I want to see Mr. Ashraf again. And that is why, I think if you can keep that in mind, and actually it leads to some kind of art of creating a controversy during the discussions and your deliberation. And if I think about, take a step back, which politicians interview would I love to see these days? And one of them on the top will be Mr. Trump, not because of he talks a lot of sense, but because he talks a lot of nonsense and it creates a lot of entertainment value. So if you go and check his viewership and everything, so I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there is an entertainment dimension to the interview, which means basically not necessarily entertainment, but a point that interests the audience to really stay glued to the discussion. There is something into that. So that's just my point. You can elaborate on it. Thank you so much for it.
Yeah, fine. I'm going to move on. I think you're right. But just even what you said goes back to the initial point I made, that between the presenter and the guest, and now in this case the channel owner, ultimately when the channel says, can this person bring us more audience, it's still the audience. Everything is directed to the audience. So here's the bad news for people watching. And some of you I've interviewed, okay? Charfaray, I've interviewed him in South Africa on a panel discussion, many others too. When you get interviewed, the bad news, and it's sorry for the ego here, if you think it's because they like you, you got it wrong. It's because how you can be used to deliver to an audience. Whether I, as the presenter, agree with you or not is not an issue. It's like, how can I get you to deliver a message to an audience? If you're not the right person, we will get someone else to do that. So therefore, I'm saying sorry for the ego here, but it's not about you. Yeah. You are a conduit to deliver to a broader audience. Okay, I'm going to move on because time is a problem. I can see that.
I will answer. I see there are quite a few questions, ladies and gents. I'll take them towards the end of the session. I would like Ashraf to first complete his session, and then we'll definitely take your questions. I see your questions there, Zakia and Tasneem. We'll definitely address them. And just a disclaimer, okay, Ashraf, just to let you know, there is a 15-year-old in the group. She's joined her mum to listen to your talk. So well, thank you.
I'm delighted because I think today in today's world, a lot of the learnings must come a form of reverse mentorship from young people. It's really important. Okay, just so that you know as well, Hawa, I don't know how much time constraints you have, but I don't. I'm pretty flexible. So if we need to move beyond the 1 hour, I'm absolutely fine.
Perfect. If the audience is available to stay, we will continue so that we make sure that all the questions are answered and you definitely complete the session. Thanks, Ashraf.
Okay. So let me therefore then go on. Right now, I've mentioned the coffee table chat, right? Here's some do's and don'ts around interviews. Okay, and I can't go through all of it, but some things that you need to consider. This notion of thinking of as a presenter as an adversary is wrong. You need to let me give you a classic example. You see, this is now my example of knowing my audience. Okay, I have a sense that many of you come from the UAE and the Indo-Pak subcontinent, so I'm going to use a cricketing analogy. Do you know some of the finest batsmen in the world cannot score runs if they don't have a bowler to bowl to them? It's an important point you need to remember. You need a bowler to bowl so you can hit the ball to the boundary for 4 and then bask in that adulation. The point I'm making, you need a good interviewer to provoke you to ask by asking the right questions that really matter, as opposed to something rather trivial and innocuous, for you to respond to up your game, to keep your mind sharp, so that you will, in this case, hit the proverbial 4 or a 6 to the boundary. You need the presenter to ask good questions. So if you've forgotten everything else, keep that image the next time you're going to get interviewed on radio and television, that this presenter is not my enemy. That's the bowler, I'm the batsman. We are in a game together to deliver a product to the audience who are the spectators. So I need the bowler to bowl a good ball so I can deliver a good answer. In this case here, right? You need to do that. The next one is, don't ask presenters to be easy on you. It's the quickest way to lose your credibility. It's really the fact that you're already being asked to be interviewed. That tells you something. You are in a unique minority. 1%, 10% of the people in the world will get interviewed. Maybe that's even too high, okay? So you're in a privileged position. Why would you still say, like, be easy on me? You have a seat at the front table. Tackle it with the confidence that should come. I'm talking of the mindset confidence, okay? That should come with understanding your responsibility to the people that you in this case serve, right? Don't read answers on air. So you may have answers you prepared in advance, and I'll talk about that in a second. The worst answers is when you're going to read answers on air, because you lose eye contact with the presenter, and not just eye contact, you lose body language contact with the presenter. You are in your own space, and it is like a call center. We've all engaged that. When a call center agent calls you and they are completely scripted, we know what they sound like. I'm interested in the call center agent who's not scripted. Can they break away and sound like they're having a coffee table chat with me? Okay, so sound like you're having the coffee table chat, which means you cannot read the answer. So again, to go back to the analogy of your friend asks you questions, you answer your friend's questions by reading off a script. How ridiculous would that be? No, be as natural as possible. And I can tell you now, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to sound perfect. You have to sound engaged. You have to sound enthusiastic. You have to sound, when your friend asks you questions, you have to sound like you care enough to give your friend an answer. That's really the thing that actually matters, right? So don't read. I'm saying to you, don't script your answers. However, there's an exception. If you are quoting something that's particularly important, and this could probably apply to an issue around, say, a matter of law, for example. If you want to pick up and quote, then you can maybe read a quote, but it shouldn't take you more than a line or two. Beyond that, you need to move on and be as natural as possible. Okay. I mentioned to you the coffee table chat.
Sorry to interrupt, Ashraf, for a second. Admiral, if you can just check some background sound coming from someone. If any of you don't have your lines muted, if I can please request to mute it. Otherwise, Admiral, if you can just check on that for me, please. Thanks.
Okay, can I continue?
Thank you, Ashraf.
It's behind Ashraf. There's nothing from the audience. But anyhow, I'm muting all.
Okay, can I continue?
Yes.
All right. Now, I mentioned to you the coffee table chat. I mentioned to you the cricketer bowling and your chance to score to hit a 4 when the bowler bowls. Okay, you need that person. So in fact, an interviewer is not hostile. Okay. However, there are times, and it will apply maybe not to everybody watching today, when the interview is a more hostile interview, when it's very much pinning down interview. But even then, so I'll move away from a bowler and a batsman to a penalty shootout in football, in soccer, for example. You still need you're the penalty taker, and you have a goalkeeper. The goalkeeper wants to keep you out. You need to score the goal. So as much as they throw a difficult question to you, you can answer that effectively if your preparation is strong enough in advance, where you know that's likely to happen. And that will come from you preparing on your own, anticipating the type of questions likely to be asked, or you with your communications team. So like that's why I love using sporting analogies. They don't get onto the soccer field without preparing. Prepare what's likely to happen in a hostile interview. Prepare what's likely to happen in a friendly interview. But in both cases, the operative word is be prepared for both scenarios. Now, here's an important one. I mentioned to you that an interview could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I've done it all. I'm sure many of you, 5 minutes. On television, very often, especially on news, if you get more than 5 minutes for an interview, you are lucky. Okay, 15 minutes max, maybe. Very rarely do you get a profile. So rule of thumb, 5-minute interview, you're probably going to have 2 facts to say. 15-minute interview, probably 3 facts maximum. 1 hour is very much a profile. Then there's maybe 10 or 15 things to say. So let's stay with the fact that typically your interview is maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Get into the interview by upfront preparing on 3 major takeouts that you want to deliver, 3 major points that you wish to land. If you're not doing that, then you would be doing yourself a disservice. So this is something you're going to prepare in advance. You don't need the interviewer to tell you that. You know why you're being interviewed, because you would have asked that question. You know your audience, you know the people you represent. Put down 3 points that you must not leave the interview without mentioning that. 3 points. Now, I'll give you one example right now. I'm doing a presentation. The one point I do not wish to leave this presentation without saying is this, and I'll say it up front, that yes, I do one-on-one interviews. I do one-on-one presentations that takes longer. We do simulated interviews, etc. And we do that, and it takes time, and that offer is open. So you can contact Hawa if you're keen on that. But I'm just putting that out there because I don't want to forget that, you see. So in the same way, if you are representing your organization, there are 3 things that are critically important to you. Make sure you know what they are. Write them down so you don't forget it. Don't read them out. Write them down. And this is important, even if the presenter doesn't ask you about those 3 things, make absolutely sure that you mention that. Find a way to do so. Okay? Do not be scripted in your answers. Do not also think you must only answer what the presenter asks you. So let me give you an example of that. Presenter would ask you, for example, and I know there's a person from Ghana, so I'll use the Ghanaian example. So, well, I'm in the UAE. You've just arrived from Ghana. What's West Africa like? So that's the question, and the answer would be, well, West Africa is a nice place to live in. But you from Ghana represent, say, you're an industrialist. So are you going to talk about West Africa with football, that the Ghanaian football team's a good team, or the old Ghanaian empire, the Ashanti Empire, or do you want to talk about your business? So when they say, for example, so you're from Ghana, what's Ghana like? The answer should be like, well, Ghana's wonderful. I've been there for X amount of years, and it's very good for my business because this is what I do, and you carry on saying it. So why? Because you're very concerned. You've got 5 minutes. If you don't give that answer in 5 minutes, you may not get a chance to land one of those 3 points. The next point is, why only 3 points? Yes, of course, you're gonna mention 10 or 15 things in the entire interview, but 3 are the 3 primary points that you must deliver to your audience. And I'm saying 3 and not 5, and 3 and not 10. You know why? Because people don't remember the 5, and people don't remember the 10. So 3, because that's what most people can remember. Okay, and hopefully you will remember that as well. Now, just next time you do an interview, you don't do it without knowing the 3 things you absolutely are going to say. And if you don't say that, then you know you are doing yourself a serious disservice. I mentioned to you about taking control of an interview. So again, the example of the cricketer, the bowler, the batsman is something that you can maybe live with for a long time here. Not only, please don't be so formal in your answers where the presenter asks you one sentence and you only give one answer, where you have a chance to elaborate feel free to do that. You at all times must be aware of how much time you have left. Okay, so where you know you can talk longer, do so, because it's basically taking control of the interview. The presenter wants a guest who's interesting, wants a guest who doesn't just give one-word answers. So, example, what's the weather like in Pakistan? It's cold, or it's hot. No, the presenter would want you to say, what's the weather like in Pakistan? Well, in my country, it's a very, very warm country, as you know, unless you're living in the Kashmiri region, and that's where it snows. But other than that, say a few things. What's very important is don't over talk it where you're giving a speech. So an interview is not a speech. A speech is when you've got 15, 20 minutes unchallenged. An interview is a repartee. That's why I'm using the example of the coffee table chat all the time. It's this engagement between you and your friend. You can't talk for 15 minutes nonstop, because that's a speech or a presentation. Say something. It shouldn't be more than a minute. Sometimes my wife tells me, Ashraf, you talk too long, and maybe that's understandable. I'll take that advice from her too. But in general, you shouldn't be answering more than 1 minute at a time. I'm not saying it's a perfect science. If your answer is 5 minutes to one question, that's a speech. If your answer is 2 minutes, maybe it's acceptable. 1 minute is fine. If your answer is 5 seconds, that's not a speech. It's not even an answer. Unless it's a straight, did you do it? Answer yes, no. That's more the legal people will understand. That's like a court of law situation, okay? But by and large, it should be like a minute, because if you're going to come across as disinterested in the conversation, I promise you, not only will the presenter lose you, but very importantly, the audience will definitely lose you as well. Now,
Ashraf, while you're on that point, there's a lot of comments and discussions going on around, is there a possibility that sometimes you might overdo it? Because when you say elaborate, when do you stop? Is it like a minute? You say a minute, but then in that minute, you must be keeping things to be pretty concise, right?
Yeah, look, you see, you need to, that is why I'm saying to you, it's like driving a car. You need to train this thing all the time. So the best way to train, if you don't want to use an expert like me, do it at home. You know, get your friends, your husband, your wife, whoever, get your partner to do a mock interview with you, because like tomorrow you're going to go on the air. So I've got 10 minutes, and literally pace yourself. It's not a perfect science, so you don't have to worry about the exact minutes, okay? But rule of thumb, don't answer longer than a minute. Okay. That's the first thing, right? I think you need to know that. Unless you're giving a story. When they ask you about a story of your life, like I would tell you, Hawa, you've done lots of things in your life. So tell me, where did all this begin? Now, in that case, if your answer is a 1 minute answer, it's probably too little. So as I'm talking to you, you notice I'm giving you some examples, but I'm also telling you that you break the rules for every one of them.
Yes.
When do you break the rules and when don't you is up to you and your communications team, because you would have workshopped that, or your media trainer, so that when you have a chance, you do that well enough. In the same way, when you're driving a car, to use the driving analogy, the rule of thumb is you drive 100 kilometers an hour. But if you have to take your wife to a clinic because she's about to give birth, then 100 km may be too slow. You get my point? So you need to understand the circumstances at all times. And that example of driving your wife or someone else to a hospital to give birth is important, because this is my next point. You can't do it all the time, but as part of, and I mentioned 3 points, right, that you must bring in. You must deliver that no matter what, even if you don't get asked. But also try in one of those, it could be one of the 3 points, it could be something else. And this you can plan it in advance. Try and make sure you give one of your answers in a story form. You see, a story narrative, a picture narrative is a lot stronger than simply being abstract in your answer. So I gave you the example now about you driving a car. And when I said don't speak too long, that carries less weight than saying drive 100 km an hour, but if you have to drive your wife to a hospital because she's going to give birth, then you can drive 120. Which is the image that sticks in your mind? You know the answer to that.
Yeah.
When you paint pictures, even in your answers, people remember the pictures. They don't remember the abstract. Okay? So this you can plan it. If you have a product that you're selling, plan this answer that I'm going to give one answer in an image form. So to give an example, the movement that I head up is called Champion South Africa. Our stated goal is to become a champion nation. That's the abstract, okay? If you interviewed me and say, what's your goal for Champion South Africa? Here's my image answer. My image answer is, I dream of the day when the Secretary General of the United Nations stands up on a podium and gives an award, a trophy, and calls up the president of the country of the winning nation and says, the winning nation for being the champion nation of the year for this year is South Africa. Do you get it? The second one, I've painted a picture. I've painted an image. That's the one you're going to remember. Better than saying, I want us to be the best. I want us to win the trophy. So it's an image that's going to be stuck in your mind. So hopefully you've understood that as well, right? I think there's so many more I can talk about. I'm a bit concerned about time, Hawa.
All right. So if I can just quickly do a quick poll on the group. Those that would like to please continue to stay. Ashraf, do we need another 10 to 15 minutes?
Yeah, probably. Look, I'm fine. It's 11. Yeah, probably 50, but maximum half an hour if you want to. But it's up to you. Okay, I'm fine with that.
So as far as the audience is concerned, if you can just give a quick show of hands, but there are some questions. Those of you who would like to ask those questions, please let us know. Ashraf, are we able to take some questions now? So there's some people are saying a maximum of 15 minutes. So maybe if we can do a good quick review of the summary in 15 minutes. And then, yeah, so quite a few of them are saying 15 minutes, Ashraf. And then we'll take the questions immediately after that, yeah?
All right, so let's do this. Let's take questions for okay, so is that what you're saying? We'll do questions after 15 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Okay. Can I then do this?
And
right?
There's some of these questions, I'll just list them because some of these questions you're going to cover in your 15 minutes anyway. So there's a question, for example, from Tasneem, is advice when you are stumped with a question, how to handle it, and also from the opposite perspective, how can you support your interviewees who are perhaps nervous for the very first time. So just keep that in mind when you are doing your presentation earlier. And then, of course, you have Kanyuso, who's Ziad from Salam Media. Thanks for joining. When do you draw a line as a presenter between being impartial or giving your own opinion? So just keep those two questions in mind as you're going through the process.
Okay, fine. So can I then do this then quickly? I'm going to we've got 3 interview clips, and if you guys can play that in order. So the first one, all right, is I'm going to just set it up. The person who's the interviewer is Mehdi Hassan from Al Jazeera, who spoke at the Oxford Union, and he spoke to South Africa's Baleka Mbete. Some of you may be very familiar with her, former Speaker in the House of Parliament in South Africa, former chairperson of the ruling party, the African National Congress, and he spoke to her in front of an audience, okay? But it's still an interview, big audience or radio, TV, it's still an interview, still an audience. And he spoke to her. I'm going to pick out 2 minutes of the clip. I want you to watch. I'm less interested in him, although he's very, very good. I'm less interested in him. And it's a pinning down interview, okay? So you know that. I'm interested in how she responds, and I'll talk on the back of that after this. So if you can just play that first one from Baleka Mbete and Mehdi Hassan, please.
All right, so Almal will take a few seconds just to get that going.
I have a problem having it's not loading. Can you play on your side? The activity are not loading on my computer.
All right, Ashraf, while I'm doing that, just give me a minute. I'll load it if you want to continue in the meantime.
All right, let me answer the question. I think Tasneem asked that question about how
do you handle a question that when you are stumped, and how to handle that?
I think the answer would be, first of all, what you don't know, you don't know. Okay, so don't try and answer a question that is beyond your scope. That's really important. Okay, so there's 2 parts. One is, what happens if I get asked something that's beyond my scope, right? Simply say, you know what, I don't know, and I'm not, well, either I don't know because I really don't know. 2 is I'm not authorized to speak about that if you're representing an organization. But organizations, you don't necessarily represent everything in the organization. So I can talk about X, but I can't talk about Y, and you can say that, right? And the third one is when you ought to be knowing the issue because you're the expert in that space and you're unclear. Well, then you have a problem, because then that's a preparation problem, because your job would have been to have prepared for the eventualities of those 2-3 important issues that are bound to come up. Having said all of that, if you are genuinely stumped even about something that you really know and you don't know, but this is something you should have known, I think you could well tell the presenter and therefore tell the audience, look, I'm a bit unclear about the answer to this right now. Is it possible that I can communicate that to you at a later stage? Now that's the least likely thing that you should be doing. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but rather do that than explain something that you don't know how to explain. Because often people believe they have to give answers because otherwise they'll be embarrassed, and they say things that they don't know, or they say things that are well beyond their scope. So hopefully that will help you, Hawa.
I'm going to start the video now. I just want to confirm that everybody can see it as I get started. Those of you that for the first time you're watching a video with us, please make sure that you click on the start button on your screen. So you will see a start button come up on your screen and the video should start showing up. So I'm going to now show the video to get started.
Howard, are we done with that, Hawa?
Hi, Ashraf. Do you want me to stop it at this point?
Yeah, at the times I've given, so you can just stop it at that point. I'm not going to say much. I mean, you can have your own opinions because time is against us. But perhaps just message us, with a poll to say, what did you make of the guest? What did you make of Baleka Mbete in particular, right? And how she came across. And do you think she best represented herself? And do you think she best represented her organization? And do you think she best represented her country? And what do you make of her body language? And if you were from the organization, do you think you would actually get someone would you call her again? It's just something to consider, all right? If we have a chance later on, we can talk about it, but I don't want to elaborate. I will say this much, okay? So that you know it, now that you've answered it. I think she was a disaster, an absolute disaster, right? The worst representation that you could make on behalf of your country. And her body language suggested she doesn't want to be there, but she's highly schooled. I mean, she's been interviewed many times. She's been a speaker in parliament. Her lack of enthusiasm, a lack of energy absolutely came through. Perhaps I will maybe get Hawa to share that with you even later on once again. So have a look at it as part of your homework, okay? And give me some thoughts, okay? Let me now play the second one. Hawa, you tell me if we can do that right away or there are problems around time.
All right. I will show it now, but if you can just continue talking for 30
okay,
seconds,
I'm going to
just give me
continue.
30
Somebody
seconds.
asked,
Yeah?
what about if you're the presenters, in this case myself, and the guest needs help? Well, let me tell you this much. This is my school of thought. If my guest is a politician, they get no help from me because they are public servants. If they are in high office, they get no help from me. They must handle themselves. Okay? Everybody else, they get support because I would support them, meaning I would try and make it as easy for them as possible. Not by asking them easy questions, no. Easy for them by creating the right environment. They are there because they already have credibility. They probably have more credibility than me. That's why they're being interviewed. I'm not being interviewed, okay? How I will help them is simply by reminding them, if I've sensed that they're a bit edgy, of the coffee table environment that they need to recreate by reminding them they're the experts and I'm not, by reminding them that they have some important things that they have to say and they must please say it, and by reminding them not to be scripted but to just say it the way you would speak to your friend. Okay, I was going to use a South African word called chommy, but here's a good example. I need to know my audience. Many of you may not be knowing what the word chommy is, but my friend. So speak as if you are speaking to your friend and have that really great chat that you would have with your friend. That's what I would remind them to do very quickly. For people who are not politicians, I can tell you now, we want them to do well. We as interviewers want them to be really engaged, because when they are engaged, it means my audience is engaged. When they're not engaged, my audience is disengaged. So it's in my interest that you come across as well as possible. However, it is also up to your communications team through your media trainer to make sure that you are adequately trained and prepared before you do that interview. It's very difficult baking a cake, for example, and there's an image again, you see. You can't bake a cake for the first time and expect to eat it a minute later. It's not going to happen. So if you're going to bake a cake for school, for example, then do some tryouts before you go do it. So the same principle, do some tryouts. Now here's the second interview.
We have the interview. It's which South Africans, is that the correct one? Which South Africans interview sets social media,
fine. So
right?
Don Hazen is South African. I'm using South African examples, of course. He is the acting leader of the opposition party in South Africa. And he was interviewed a couple of weeks ago on television and speaking about COVID-19 and their views. Many countries have had lockdown. South Africa's got lockdown. His views was that they need to accelerate the opening up of the country. That's the backstory to it. But there's a 2-minute conversation that you need to watch. And again, there's the presenter, but my focus is on the guest. And did the guest represent his country? Did he represent his political party, the opposition party, well? Did he represent himself well? And most importantly, did he deliver to the audience to the point where the audience now has got affinity with the guest to say, ha, this guy makes a lot of sense. I like him. He is really, really convincing. You watch this and you be the judge.
So I'm starting the video.
Go ahead.
Fed up with the lack of information.
And Hawa, you'll tell me when you're ready to go, right? Okay.
All right, so I've stopped that, Ashraf, yeah?
Okay, again, Paul, you can tell me what you think about who he is and how he represents his organization, and how what I'm happy to do, by the way, either on your platform or you know, we've created a social media, a LinkedIn page
Yes.
called Face the Media, and if we need to have a further chat with people even around that about this type of information, I'm happy to share that. We can debate that at length. Okay, but here's my
Absolutely.
one-liner. You have your own thoughts about it. Absolute disaster number 2. Okay, he lost the ability to influence an audience. He's a politician. He needs votes in a year's time. He's lost the ability because he took it very, very personally. When the presenter asks him to explain about the who are you talking about? Who's the we? I don't think it's unreasonable. Okay, but surely he could say, well, look, it's a sample of people who support my party. What's wrong with that? But he took it personally. He's like, tune into my channel. Was completely off the beat here, right? And that's how to lose an interview. When you lose an interview, you lose the opportunity to influence an audience. When he took the interview, why did he speak to the interviewer in the first place? What is his reason for saying yes to it? Okay, now the interview became all about their slagging match and not about his ability to influence an audience. So that's disaster number 2. Now here's another one. I mentioned to you about speaking in images, right? And I will also say this, if you could just set up the third one, Hawa, and tell me when you're ready.
Yes.
I mentioned to you about speaking in images because people remember images. And I didn't say this before, but try and speak in sound bites. So not every sentence, but in your points, at least 1 or 2 answers that you're going to plan to give, because you see, in your preparation, you're being interviewed for 15 minutes. You know why they're interviewing you, because say you're this entrepreneur. So plan what's likely to come. Almost script, not script, sort of preempt what's likely to be asked, and answer those questions to yourself in advance, and even get your friend to do that as well. And in doing that, 1 or 2 of your answers not only must be in images, but also must be in sound bites. Because when you answer in a sound bite, it's very quotable. To use an example of Barack Obama in his campaign for the USA, when he said, for the presidency, he said, yes, we can. Goodness, we still remember that, even if he couldn't do it many of the times. Ask the Libyans,
Ashraf,
for
we're ready
example.
for you for the video when you're ready, yeah?
Okay. So he answered by using a catchphrase that gets repeated over and over again. You're not being boring. You are embedding a sound, a message to people that they understand. So this notion, and I'm hoping you get interviewed at maybe 5 different channels. There's nothing wrong in repeating the key catchphrase of your organization in a soundbite form at all times, because that's when you reinforce it. So I, for example, whenever I do an interview for Champion South Africa, I will repeat this phrase: champion people build champion nations, because then it sits in the mind. I can't just say, oh, we're good, we want to create winners. People don't get that. When you create a catchphrase, it's also quotable on social media, especially those who understand Twitter. That's the one they're going to quote. So talking about images, here's the third one. My guest, in this case, it's me talking, but you don't see me at all. I've cut myself out with Professor Salim Abdul Karim. I did it on podcast for the Champion South Africa podcast, and I asked him about his nickname. So his nickname is Slim, right? And in Afrikaans, in the South African indigenous language, that means clever, okay? But see how he goes about explaining it, and pick up from there how he uses images, lessons for you to learn. Go ahead and let me know when you're done, right?
Okay, Ashraf, that's the video.
Okay, good. So again, you may have your own thoughts about it, and feel free to poll us and tell us what you think. I just wish to draw attention to my question: where do you get the nickname Slim? And you didn't say. I mean, you could have said. You see, this is the two things. You could have said, well, Slim is a nickname in the Afrikaans language, which sounds like Salim. It sounds like a shorter version of Salim. No, he gave a whole story, right? He spoke about the teacher in his class and how he was being a bit funny. And by giving that story and how he went to the playground and people teased him about it, that's the image that you remember. So one, it's image, and two, it's story building. And I'm telling you, you can't do it all the time, but if you plan to mention a few things in images and stories in your interview when you do it, people will remember the narrative of the image and the story extremely well. That is why now you will not forget the story of how Professor Salim Abdul Karim became called by all his peers as simply Slim. All right. So those are the three. How about now? I want to just say this, then we'll take questions very quickly. There's a follow-up in terms of what you need to do post the interview, right? You need to, once you've done the interview, you have bragging rights. You can't do the interview and keep quiet. You see, an interview is a massive endorsement of who you are. You're getting interviewed on radio and television because of certain credibility that you have. You're bringing something to a broader audience. You better tell people about it. And today's times, it means telling people on their WhatsApp platforms, sharing it from YouTube, posting it on social media to say, hey, I was interviewed by, say, Ashraf Garda. You need to do that type of thing. Your social media and your communications organization must then also inform other people about the same interview you've done. So there's nothing wrong. However, if you're being interviewed, for example, by me, you take the same interview and you share it with somebody in the UAE to say, I've done this interview in South Africa. This is what I'm all about. Would you like to interview me? So what I'm trying to tell you is you've earned the right for bragging rights. For goodness sake, you must use it. You must use social media. You must then peddle that interview with other media organizations. If you don't do it, well, quite honestly, I'll be rather disappointed because you have a leverage. I mentioned to you, 10 out of 50 people here today get interviewed more than once. How are you going to get interviewed more than once if you don't tell other people that you have been interviewed somewhere else? You need to tell them about it. I can talk more about it, but I think time is against us. So let's take some questions. I'm happy to talk until you tell me to stop here.
All right, perfect. Ashraf, thank you very much. I love the idea of bragging rights, and I see there's a few people mentioning how they like the idea of bragging rights. So ladies and gents, Armo, I'm going to ask you to please unmute. It'll be easier, instead of reading questions out, it'll be easier for people to just ask their question directly so that we can then take those questions, and it's time for interaction, ladies and gents. If there is any sound coming from the background, please make sure that you mute yourself if you are not chatting. Armo, please, if you can take care of that. Also, if you'd like to show your video, please do so as well. So, ladies and gents, any questions or comments that you might have? You all have been unmuted.
I'd just like to compliment Ashraf in a very short span with the limitation. He has, as we say, samandar ko kuze mein dal diya. The whole ocean has been put in a small bottle. So great job done.
Right. Thank you, Brother
Most
Zafar.
appreciated. And so here's the bragging rights, because I need to follow what I've just preached. If you wish to connect me to anybody to be interviewed in Pakistan or the UAE, fine. That's the language I'm using in the context of what I'm. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So there is a question coming from Elise. I'm not sure if Elise is still here, but when one do a long webinar and you cannot see anyone, you're not able to engage. All right, sorry, that was a comment. Are there any other questions, ladies and gents? You're welcome. You are unmuted. If you can please ask those questions. I'm just looking through the chats as well if I've missed any questions. Armo, if you can just double check for me. So I see there is a question from Gail that she did find. I'm just not sure. Have you answered Ziad's question? When do you draw a line as a presenter between being impartial or giving your own opinion?
I actually didn't answer that question. I think I'd forgotten about it. So yeah, let me bring it up. I think, Ziad, by and large, right, when you are a presenter, you must ask yourself, now this is the presenter again, do you represent yourself or do you represent the people? For me, as a presenter, it's always been about I represent the people. So when I ask questions, it's because the people need to know. When I don't ask questions, it's because I think the people don't need to know. When I ask a second or third question, a pinning down question, is because I think the people need to know. When I ask for clarity, as the lady said in the clip that I showed you just now with the South African minister, it's once again because the people need to know. So maybe it doesn't give you an answer about impartiality or not. All I'm trying to tell you is rule of thumb as a host, only ask questions that you think people need to know, not that you need to know. Because very often I could be interviewing someone that I actually know quite well. So if I leave it to me only to ask questions that I need to know, I may not ask you about things because I have the answers already. But my entire focus must be, how do I deliver this guest to an audience? You as a guest, your focus must be, how do I deliver my message to the audience in both cases? And that should, in a less academic way, should help you answer the question is, am I serving the people or am I serving my self-interest by asking or not asking people who I think are my friends, people I admire greatly, but my responsibility is to ask that question. We've just lost audio from my side.
Sorry,
well.
Ashraf, sorry, I lost my audio there for a second. I think I was muted. I apologize. So a question from Nabila Reher: is it normal practice to ask the interviewer 4 questions beforehand, especially when doing profile or information type questions?
So let me understand this. You're the guest, right? And you're asking, is it normal to ask the presenter, in this case myself, the 4 questions he's likely to answer beforehand? Okay, here's my thought. Okay, if you ask me that directly or you ask me that through my producer, you're only going to get one answer, which is no, I don't give it to you. Okay, what you can ask is, you can ask the theme of what you're going to be talking about. But hopefully I've addressed that from the beginning, which is, you have to ask yourself, when you're getting interviewed, like, why am I being interviewed? What? So when the request is made from a radio or TV channel, they want to interview you, you should be asking, or your communications team, why would you like to interview this person? And those other questions, how many minutes, all those things I mentioned beforehand. That should determine the theme. So for example, let's say, for example, say Nabila, for example, and I don't know enough about it, but let's just say you're an entrepreneur. And the plan is, we want to speak to you about your business. They can't now speak to you about your religious expression, and your political views, and some other issues about your other family members who've done right or done wrong, because that's not part of the theme. Okay, because you've already got that brief, and that's why ideally you should get the brief via email, so you are on the same page, because the same presenter can ask the same guest, can have an interview with the same guest 3 times and have 3 completely different takes. So you would know the brief. Once you get the brief, the presenter will simply tell you the theme. The actual questions, I would never give it to you, because it moves it into a scripted territory, and quite honestly, you don't deserve that. You deserve the platform. That's why you're being interviewed. What you don't deserve is being spoon-fed. Goodness, if a child asks you, the 15-year-old who's watching, if the 15-year-old says, please give me the answer to the exam question in advance, like, what would you tell that person? To say, isn't the idea that the only reason you're writing the exam in the first place is because you are worthy of it? So you are worthy of being interviewed. That's why you're being interviewed.
I think I like that very much. And Nabila, thanks for joining us on webcam as well. So perhaps if you want to elaborate, but however, I must tell you that there are certain radio stations, and especially, you know, that I speak on, and sometimes a week before they actually ask me to be able to send in certain pointers that I would like to talk about. And for me, it's like, here's the topics, here's the theme. Engage me, let it be exciting, because when you have scripted discussions, it's not as exciting and you don't get the best out of a particular individual. So I agree with you 100% there, Ashraf. Nabila, while I'm taking any other questions, anything you would like to elaborate or comment on based on your question that you asked, Ashraf?
Yeah, look, I just want to say, you know, I've never been on radio, but a couple of times when I've been approached, like I've thought about doing it that way, creating a theme with the person, but it seems like the presenter had other ideas or they want to do it very quickly. So they just say to me, I'm going to send you a few questions over WhatsApp that I'll be asking you. So I didn't end up doing the interviews, but I'm wondering whether that seems to be the normal practice in this, especially with this quick age of information that people do this, you know. And it actually makes it more difficult in other ways to understand what you're going to be doing. So that's kind of where that question came from.
So my thought, it's not the practice. It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't be. It's not the practice of a good presenter. Okay, like you get good drivers and bad drivers. It's not the It's not the practice of a good presenter. The presenters will give you themes, or the producer will give you a theme, and that's it. Here's the other important question to you, Nabila. So, if you get asked something that is not part of the brief, you have the right not to answer it. Okay? But you could answer it if you choose to. So sometimes a person can bring up something, like, for example, let's take Hawa. I know what she does in a platform, but I also know some parts of her private life, for example. If I'm going to interview Hawa and I bring up some aspects of her private life, which was not part of the brief, whether I'm comfortable or not to bring it, I bring it up. She can answer it if she chooses to, because it suits her interest to do so, right? But she can also say, you know, that's really not part of what we've agreed on. And can I rather, and this is how I'd answer if I was Hawa. Look, you've asked me this, but I really wish to focus more on the training, which is, as you know, part of the reason that you wanted me here. And then you go very quickly into that. So in media terms, we talk about taking an off ramp. So Hawa can take an off ramp. That means you don't have to answer a question that is not part of the brief, not
Absolutely.
part of the general theme agreed upon.
Absolutely. I like that because sometimes there's a lot of things that you don't have the time to discuss at that particular moment of time, or it could even be sensitive issues as well. Neville, a comment. Ashraf, you lied to us. A disclaimer on the actual group. You went well over your 30 tips. So thank you. Reminded me of my first disaster management media training. So Neville, thank you so much for joining us on that. Thank you for a great informative session. Many notes taken. Are there any other questions that I might have missed? Mohammed Rahman, thank you. Ashraf, you have shared gems today and your mind for lifelong experience. Orbrix, thank you. I'm just checking for any other questions. I don't know if I've missed any questions, but those of you that would like to, you are unmuted. So please, if you'd like to ask your questions now, please do so. We're going to allow 5 minutes.
Hi, it's Molokhari Makwela. Can you hear me?
Hi, Molokhari. Yes, we can. Thank you for joining.
Hi there. I actually want to circle back to the questions about, you know, what questions to answer and what not to answer, particularly for academics who may be quite nervous about undertaking live radio interviews. And I've had instances where I've trained the academics and kind of prepared them to undertake these things. And then at the end of it, they felt like, well, they didn't ask this, they didn't ask that, or I felt too rushed to answer this. Can we get back on or try them to do a follow-up? And of course, news is about what is currently happening. And so, I mean, what is the practice? What are the possibilities of actually calling you back, Ashraf, and saying, hey, I know we did this, but can we expand and continue on this? Or do I offer you a different angle to consider? Or do I even go to a different platform, knowing that you've already touched on it and maybe you're not interested?
Okay, I think it's a very important question. Here's my thoughts on this. First of all, the nature of radio and television is, by and large, it's very unscripted. It's like playing cricket or soccer or probably performing on a music platform, you may not do it the same way some other time. Okay, it's what the mystery is what makes it so exciting. Okay, so that's the reality. That does pose a problem, meaning time is a problem. And to go back to start at the very beginning, at the end rather, if you are going to be hoping as a guest to say, but can I come and do it again some other time, forget about it. I mean, you hope so, but don't plan on that. It's unlikely to happen. Okay, and no presenter, no producer, no station manager is going to give you the chance for another chance because you don't have a chance to say whatever. What you need to be doing, and certainly with the people that you train from your academic side, is if they've got 10 minutes, this is why I'm saying the beginning is so important. You've got 10 minutes. You must know that 10 minutes is probably not more than 4 or 5 questions maximum. And you still have your 3 key answers that you want to land, your 3 key messages you want to deliver. The responsibility is actually not with the presenter, but with the guest to answer those 3 key messages that you don't want to leave, even if they don't ask that question. Just say it anyway. I promise you, I have done that. As a guest, where people have said, thank you very much. You need, and I know they're going to leave, so you need to have like a timer with you. Like, actually, I've only got 2 minutes left. My goodness, man. So when they're talking, don't think they're going to ask you another question. Answer that question, and you say, there's a minute left. You know what? They're not going to ask me another one, but I want to give this important point. Then advise your academic to say, answer that first question and go straight ahead to answering the second question anyway. Okay, so for example, if I spoke to Hawa right now and said, Hawa, well, Hawa, I hope this session went well. If she's got 30 seconds left, she could say, thank you very much, Ashraf. Yes, appreciate it. But if she wants to also plug what's coming up tomorrow, Hawa should be saying, Ashraf, yes, it went well. We really appreciate it. But let me tell the audience, that's not all. In fact, tomorrow we got even a better presentation. You can't miss this one. So can you see what? Because one of the key messages was to get you, the audience, to follow the program tomorrow. So you don't always have to follow the script. You need to, and let me tell you now, presenters love it when you as a guest bend the rules slightly because it challenges them. I certainly enjoy it.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Thank you very much for that interesting question. Thanks, Ashraf. Are there any other questions? I don't want to take up too much of your time, so we're just going to allow another minute or so. If there are any questions, please, you are unmuted at the moment. All right, so while we're waiting for anybody to chat, Ashraf, you've got your minute to be able to do a final conclusion on the topic that you've just discussed right now.
Okay, so here's the one that's not part of the plan, which is regarding webinars. Okay, this is just my opinion. More and more people are effectively presenting or guests in some form now because of these webinars like we're having right now. I think in the early days of lockdown around the world, it became very, very novel to say, I've got a shirt, but look, I'm actually wearing shorts. And I've got a shirt, but I've got my library. Now, you notice I've deliberately got a specific background. I'm suggesting that the novelty of saying I'm very casual with my shorts is out, in my opinion, because ultimately you're a guest for a certain reason, which is delivering an area of expertise that you can deliver. What you're wearing is not what I'm interested in. So what you're wearing below waist height, how can that be the biggest issue that you want to portray as a message to people? So that's one thing. The second part is many people, including myself, we tended to go the library route where the background was all about the library, okay, and the books. The problem with that is people tend to, I promise you, as they're watching you, as they're watching me, if my library books are the background, they're trying to see the books you read, okay? So they're very, very distracted. It sounds cute initially, but it's not, okay? If you look at most TV shows, for example, they have a specific backdrop. So you as a presenter or as a guest on a webinar, my suggestion to you, especially if it's a serious webinar where you are participating, create the backdrop that you wish to create. Now, in my case today, I've got a black and white shirt. I deliberately chose to create a black backdrop, and I can tell you now it's a cloth hanging over a certain area because it works for the image that I wish to create right now. So it cuts out the clutter, meaning what I'm saying is be very deliberate all the time about the imaging that you wish to create there. As far as the overall training is concerned, yeah, look, this is a snapshot. What I really do is, what you need to do is like learning to drive a car. We've given you the theory. What should be happening for people who are really interested is people like myself and maybe others too, of course, they provide these one-on-one training sessions where it could take a good few hours of to and froing and critiquing, and that is something far more elaborate. So if you are interested in that, and we can even do it online these days, as you now know, then the go-to person will be connect through Hawa, and then we can chat further. But the bottom line to this, of all the things I've said, is if I said that 20% of people get interviewed in total from people who are watching us, and maybe not more than 5% of them get interviewed ever, which means 10 out of 100 get interviewed regularly. And when you do that, you become an expert in your space. My suggestion is embrace the media as a very important conduit for you to deliver an authoritative message to an audience that you are trying to reach, and therefore gear your training and your knowledge of answering questions to doing just that. You want repeat interviews like you would want repeat business as well.
Absolutely. Ashraf, Garda, thank you very much. On behalf of Orbrix and Training Excellence South Africa, we just like to say thank you for your commitment. Ladies and gents, please watch this space. We will be running many more sessions, also including a lot of sessions with Ashraf, where we take this program to a much higher extent, where we start to look at how do you actually do this as a training program. So those of you who are in the media profession and wants to be trained, both here in the UAE, Pakistan, or anywhere, and it's not going to be limited to what area you're in, because of course we're starting it off on these particular webinars. So thank you very much. We will be sending you details of that so that you are able to join those sessions. Also, ladies and gents, watch out for our summit that is coming up now on the 18th of June, and of course many other HR training programs and others that we will be running over the next few weeks. Ashraf, once again, it has been really inspiring, and most importantly, I've learned so much. I mean, I've got my amazing backdrop here at the back of me. It's the office, working from home, and of course the office TV sitting there at the back. But of course, we know that's not ideal. So as you've noticed, when I started off on a chair, and then I moved over to this chair. But of course, at the end of the day, it's all about what we learn to be able to be better. So I'm hoping the next time you see me, we will change the backdrop, and definitely not going to have lots of books behind me with the backdrop as well. So thank you very much for that. The rest of you, we just like to thank you. Those of you that have stayed with us, Mr. Neville, thank you so much for all your interaction and your comments, very insightful as well. Nazneen Shah, thank you very much. Naz Bamji, Nabila Laher, Muhammad Ali Rahiman, Malakhadi, Liesl, Tom, thank you. I know you've mentioned earlier you needed to run and leave, but we thank you for coming back and joining us again. Kahatsi, thank you for being here. Ishtiaq, Rana, all the way, thank you so much. And I see we've had lots of guest entrances who didn't put their names in, but we thank you. I know if there's any queries you have, please let us know. And most importantly, ladies and gents, those of you that inquired about the video, yes, the video will be downloaded. We will do some editing to it, so give it at least about 48 hours, and we will then start releasing the video. Please follow the YouTube video channel of Orbrix, but also that of Ashraf Garda from Champion South Africa. And Ashraf, if you get a chance to, in the chat, if you can just type out for us your channel that people can actually follow as well, that would be fantastic. And we'll put that out with our thank you email to everyone as well. Are there any other final comments? But I don't see that. So ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time. We look forward to interacting with you, and my team will be sending you all an email of thank you together with the links that Ashraf has shared with regards to the videos. So you will be able to receive those links so you can watch them in your own time. And as Ashraf says, that you can use it as homework to also learn from the process and interact with him on LinkedIn. So ladies and gents, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.